Secretary of State Hillary Clinton arrived in Afghanistan one day before President Hamid Karzai will be sworn in for another term. One thing she'll do on behalf of the United States is urge President Karzai to rout out the corruption in his government. And that's going to be a tough job. I'm Jane Bornemeyer. I'm here with Kirk Krautler of the Times Foreign Desk, who's handling our story for tomorrow. Kirk, describe to us what makes this job so difficult for President Karzai.
Well, for President Karzai, he was elected in the first place now because he struck a lot of alliances with allies around the country, and he's promised quite a bit of stock now in his new government. So he needs to follow through on those promises in order to keep himself in power and in favor with people around the country. But for the Americans, that's not going to promise good governance, and it's not going to promise government that's not corrupt. So it's going to be a bit of a tug of war.
So how does President Karzai rout out corrupt officials? I mean, what kind of authority does he have to do that? And if there are so many of them, I mean, where does he even begin?
He could start with his cabinet, and he could have a bit of a cabinet shakeup, or he could look at his regional governors. So I think there'll be a lot of attention paid by journalists, international community officials in Washington as to what his early cabinet appointments are, and if he takes out certain key people in important ministries with unsavory reputations.
And are there a couple of examples of people who stand out in your mind as targets maybe for President Karzai?
Well, I mean, there are certain ministries that are very, very important, but I mean, already he's come under a lot of pressure before the election to kind of distance himself or replace his first vice president, General Dostum, but he seems very unlikely to do that. Dostum has a very sketchy track record of human rights abuses from earlier Afghan wars, but he did bring President Karzai a lot of support, particularly in the north of the country. So he's beholden to him now, and it seems that he's probably likely to keep him on.
And how does the United States actually measure progress? And to what extent does U.S. support depend on that progress?
Well, the progress is very important. I mean, American officials are likely to set certain benchmarks for him in order to also maintain support for the war in Congress. You know, for President Karzai, I mean, over time, I guess is where we're going to have to see whether his management of the country is any better. For the Americans, it's very important because they can have a battle strategy, which the Obama administration is working on now, but unless the government can actually deliver effective services to people and gain the trust of Afghans, then there's really not a kind of a second leg to the stool there.